Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome at ESCP. We are very happy to have you tonight. In the name of our Dean, Professor Loluza, I would like to give some words to our colleagues from the Academy of Science. We are very happy to have this second conference in the series Major Challenge for the Future, organized by ESCP with the French Academy of Science. And the purpose is really to broaden the horizons and in the spirit of interdisciplinarity that is very dear to our school and to the academy. So I would like to thank Professor Antoine Triller, Monsieur le Secrétaire Perpétuel the Academy of Science, because I know we cannot translate, right, your title. And we would like to thank also Professor Yves Bréchet and Professor Marc Fontecave. We are very honored to have you tonight for this event. So we have students from ESCP and other institutions in the room, and also many of you are online. So thank you very much for attending online, and we hope that we will have a good time tonight. And last but not least, I would like to thank Arthur Decazo and Pedro dos Santos Braz from ESCP International Politics Society, who will introduce our guest speakers and also will manage the Q&A session with the room. So thank you very much, and have a good evening tonight.
So thank you, Anaïs, for the presentation. I'm going to now present our great guest speakers here today with us in the room and online. Starting first with Professor Yves Bréchet. He's a great material scientist who has devoted most of his research on metals and alloys. He graduated from École Polytechnique in 1984 and obtained his PhD in materials physics from the University of Grenoble in 1987, followed by his habilitation in 1992. In addition to his role at Grenoble INP, he has been an associate professor at McMaster University in Canada and Jiantong University in China. In 2012, he was appointed High Commissioner of Atomic Energy in France. He is also a member of the French Academy of Sciences. Professor Yves Bréchet's research focuses on microstructural transformations in metals and alloys, microstructural property in relationships, and optimal material selection methods. More recently, his analysis on natural material architectures has guided the development of tailor-made materials, combining multiple components and geometries to enhance traditional materials. Highly involved with both academia and industry, he has worked in fields such as aerospace, automotive, energy production, and biomedical materials. He has coordinated numerous scientific projects and served as scientific advisor to companies like ArcelorMittal and EDF, as well as research institutions such as CEA and ONERA. Committed to education and scientific outreach, he has chaired the board of École de Chimie de Paris and the scientific council of the Foundation for Science Teaching in Middle Schools, La PAM Foundation. He has received numerous awards, including the CNSR Silver Medal and an honorary doctorate from McMaster University. And currently, he is the Director of Scientific Research of the Saint-Gobain Corporation. So now let's present our second guest speaker, Professor Marc Fontecave. Professor Marc Fontecave is a former student of the École Normale Supérieure d'Enseignement Technique, where he obtained his aggregation in physical sciences with a specialization in chemistry in 1972. And after launching his career at CNRS, earning a state doctorate in 1984 and completing a postdoctoral fellowship at Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, Sweden. He went on to become a professor at Joseph Fourier University in Grenoble in 1988. Professor Marc Fontecave's passion for chemistry led him to create and preside over a research team on the university campus, soon to become the Laboratory of Chemistry and Biology of Metals at the CAEA Grenoble Center. He started teaching as a professor at the Collège de France in 2008, where he now presides over the chair of chemistry of biological processes and directs the laboratory of chemistry of biological processes and George University unit between the Collège de France, SNRS, and Sorbonne University. Professor Marc Fontecave is a great specialist in chemistry at the interface of biology. He studies enzymes to understand how they function and how they contribute to essential biological processes. His work sheds light on these enzymes, helping creating vital molecules and modifying genetic materials. And of course, his work also includes the development of new catalysts with the aim of advancing technologies for solar storage and conversion. And this includes innovative methods to split water from oxygen and hydrogen to produce clean fuels and to convert carbon dioxide into useful products, contributing to sustainable energy solution. And of course, he's a member of the Academy of Sciences as well. So welcome to Professor Marc and Professor Yves.
Thank you so much for the invitation and for raising this problem that you have on the screen. So I have here another screen where I see what you see. Let me start with the first comment, which is in this title. I try to avoid the term decarbonation because it means that we have in mind that carbon could be totally suppressed from the societies and from the planet. This is ridiculous. The planet is very much carbonized and it will always be carbonized in the future. Everything here is carbon made. Yourself, you are basically made of carbon and water. And this will be the case in the future. So what we have to do is not to decarbonize the planet, which is again a kind of ridiculous objective for me. What we have to do is to suppress the fossil fuels as much as possible from the societies, so coal, oil, and gas. So I used to develop this concept of defossilization, but I'm not sure that you find this word in the dictionary. And maybe it means something else, but that's what I mean when I say defossilization. We have to get rid of the fossil fuels. So now every sector has to make a big effort to limit the CO2 emission everywhere. And today we talk about industry. So I won't be long, but I want to let you know first, taking the example of the French industry, but you may find these numbers for almost all developed countries. So you have to know that the energy consumption in France is 1,600 terawatt hours. Maybe you don't see what could be terawatt hours, but it's a unit of energy. And the energy consumption for the industry is, I would say, only 20%. So industry is a sector that we have to work on, but it's not the principal sector that consumes energy and emit CO2. I would say that this is also because, unfortunately, the weight of the industry is decreasing in France. I mean, we are really in a very bad deindustrialization process that lasted for the last 20 years. And as you know, there is a real need to reindustrialize. And probably in that case, we will increase our energy consumption. But today it's 20%. The second thing, so here you have a kind of repartition of the energy that is consumed. Chemistry is the main thing. So, for example, you need energy to produce chemicals, plastics, polymers, solvents, and pharmaceuticals, and so on. And you have steel production. I mean, you have different proportion. That's not so important. The important thing is to realize that already 1/3 of the energy consumed in the industry is electricity. So 1/3 is already electrified. I may say one thing, is that you have probably heard that one important aspect of the energetic transition is to increase our electricity consumption. So we want to electrify a lot of sectors: mobility, the electrical vehicles, industry, housing, heat. I mean, Yves will talk about it. I won't say anything about it. But why do we need to electrify as much as possible? It's because what we want to do is to remove the fossil fuels. And the only way we see how to replace it quite easily is to replace them with wind, solar energy, nuclear energy, and these are all electrical sources. So we have no choice. I mean, we have to do electricity. So that's why what the industry has to do is to try to replace the second third, which is gas, and the third, which is petrol, with some electricity. So there is one objective for decarbonizing the industry, is to electrify the industrial processes. Here you have a list of some of the most energy demanding products. Steel in number 1, cement, ethylene, hydrogen, aluminium, glass, and so on. So all these processes today, I mean, the production of these materials today consumes a lot of energy and emit a lot of CO2. So if we electrify with low carbon electricity like solar, wind, and nuclear, we will make a big progress towards low carbon industry. The second thing is that you have to know that, but it's not true only for industry, the major part of our energy consumption is heat. It's producing heat. And it is true. It is really true in the industry, where you need a lot of heat to help the industrial processes. So we need to electrify the heat production. That's what the industry tries to do. And the third aspect is that we have to find new sources, and that has to be renewable, new sources of carbon. Again, when all the chemicals that I mentioned, plastic, polymers, solvents, pharmaceuticals, and so on, that we need are produced from fossil fuels. This we call petrochemicals. Tomorrow, if we don't do it from those sources, then we need some other sources, and that's what I mentioned here. So you have biomass, you have waste, and you have CO2 as well. Okay, in terms of CO2 emissions, again, industry is not the major contributor. I mean, the major one is mobility, is transport. That's where you consume most of the fossil fuels. CO2 emissions is about 18% of total emissions in France. And what you see, I have no time and I cannot show you because I would need to point behind me, but it's too difficult. What you could see from the figure below is that really industry is the first sector today in terms of reduction of CO2 emissions. The progress is much stronger in this case. So you can see it from the blue and dark red surfaces, which are decreasing since 1990. So the industry has made already quite a lot of efforts to diminish their CO2 emissions. In part, it is also due to the deindustrialization, which is not a good trend. Okay. the challenge that the industry has is that one requested to remove totally the CO2 emission. I think this is quite impossible. But nevertheless, if you see this kind of figure, this is what we call the Stratégie Nationale Bas Carbone. It is the scenario that the French government has designed, and that's where you see that the industry, the orange surface here, you see it's almost zero in 2050. Yeah, so we can discuss it, but my opinion is that this is quite unrealistic. But this is a kind of objective that the industry has. And this is quite complicated, but just note that from these official scenarios, one requests that the electrification of the industry, which today electricity accounts for about 100 terawatt hours, should go to almost 200. So it's doubling. Here it's 180, but it's doubling the electricity. So you have to see that the difference between 180 and 115 is the equivalent of 6 nuclear plants, 6 EPR. So, of course, when you electrify a sector, you have, of course, to produce electricity to electrify the sector. And this is a huge amount of electricity. And so far, we have not increased our consumption of electricity. We have not increased our production of electricity. I would say that the consumption is even decreasing so far. But the objective is to electrify, and that's the way to decarbonize the industry, which is I mean, I'm a chemist, so I need some molecules to feel well. No, I will take just the hydrogen business. So today, it is the first line. You can easily see that hydrogen is made from methane, from gas. That's why it's bad. That's why we call it gray, and it is emitting a lot of CO2. You can see in the equation, we produce hydrogen, but we also produce CO2. So this is the kind of thing we have to change. So the way to do it is to combine electricity and water. If you do that, you have the reaction, the second reaction, and in that case, you produce hydrogen, but the byproduct is oxygen, which is great, not toxic, except for some anaerobic microorganisms, but it's okay. They know how to deal with some oxygen on the planet. That's an example. That's an example which is quite clear of how the industry can proceed. Yeah, I already mentioned that we have to find carbon sources. I don't want to go. I have been too long, but we can say here. I mentioned that here you see industry has to make fuels for the car, for the planes, for the trains, blah, blah. And without oil and gas and coal, it has to do this with biofuels, bioethanol, biodiesel, biokerosene. This is the biomass and waste strategy. And there is what we call electrical fuels, e-fuels. Maybe you have heard about it. These are fuels that you make from CO2 and electricity. This is what I mentioned below. There is no need to go into details. And furthermore, as I already mentioned, all these e-fuels can serve to make the chemicals that were before petrochemicals, but are just now chemicals from these sources. So I'm finished now. So I wanted to tell you what means decarbonizing or defossilizing the industry. These are several that the main strategy we can. I mean, the industry can develop to proceed towards less CO2.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. So I'm going to talk to you about this defossilization or decarbonation of industry with a biased viewpoint. I'm going to talk from the viewpoint of a material scientist. So there is a good reason for that. Then when you want to make something, you make it with something. And materials is a stuff from which things are made. That means that the materials problem might take one of your brilliant ideas and keep it as a dream, or make your brilliant idea created into something you are going to be able to sell, or turn it into a nightmare. So that's why I'm going to talk about the role of materials in the decarbonation of industry. Now, here what you have on this diagram is a CO2 footprint in France. The CO2 footprint, which is related to transportation, to industry, to building operation, and building materials for construction. I mean, this percentage might vary from one country to another one, but what you have to keep in mind is that what you need in order to work in these industries is materials in huge quantities. That these materials must remain affordable, and the intrusion into people's habit must remain acceptable. And that gives you some limits, and I will try in the few minutes I'm going to talk to give you two ideas. The first one is that there is a very big difference between the speech and the action. I mean, you can talk forever about that, but then you have to do something. And that as a corollary is that it doesn't make any sense to have an objective without having a path to reach this objective. So I'm going to talk to you about paths to reach an objective, which is to have a more sustainable economy. Now, if I look at what can we do on this camembert, basically, if I look at transportation, I can think that the decarbonation can take place because you are changing the fuel, and that the whole stuff of electric cars or hydrogen cars, of biofuels. But you can also think of decarbonation because you try to save the weight of the car. If your car is less heavy, you can make more kilometers with the same amount of energy. Now, the question you might ask yourself, do you really need all the stuff that are in the cars? For decades, the structure of the car has been becoming lighter and lighter, and the weight of the car is becoming heavier and heavier, which is basically that you are filling the cars with gadgets. The second aspect I would like to talk with you is about building. Building, you can think of building materials. So how do you decrease the CO2 footprint? Basically, you can play on the concrete, try to have less cement in concrete. You can play on steel, try to have less carbon footprint for steel. You can think of biosourced materials. But there are a number of questions which are going to be here in material construction, such as the durability. How long is it going to last? That, again, is going to be a very important issue if you want to decarbonize. And then there is a decarbonation of the operation of the building. And basically, the operation of the building, the cost in energy and the footprint in CO2 is basically the cost of insulation of the building, the cost of heating the building or cooling the building. And then it's again a question of materials. What are going to be the best ways of keeping the energy that you put inside the building, so it's doing its work and not heating the feet of the birds? Now, if I look at what happens in a building, you can think of decreasing the CO2 footprint for the materials, and you can decrease the energy consumption of the operation of the building. Now, let's look at a building. If you look at the loss, the energy loss inside the building, you have roughly 13% which are going through the windows. You have something like 20% which are going through the walls, and 20% which are going through the roof. And therefore, if you want to save energy in your building, you have to make insulation of the roof, insulation of the walls, either from the inside or from the outside. And you have to have windows which are going to be active in terms of energy balance between the outside and the inside. But now, another thing which I would like to give you in terms of going beyond the speech. You all know when you rent an apartment or when you buy a house, probably when you're a student, it's more renting an apartment than buying a house, but you have a sort of diagnosis of the thermal diagnosis. You have to know that this thermal diagnosis has basically absolutely no physical ground. You are not measuring things. You are ticking the boxes and say, I've made an insulation, I've made double glazing, and so on and so forth. If you really want to do something efficient, you need to measure the way the insulation has been done. And you should never subsidize something when the work has not been properly done. So a very simple way is to use a method. You just put something inside the building, just make a heating pulse, and just look how the temperature is decreasing. That gives you a direct measurement of the state of insulation of the building. Now, if I look at materials inside buildings, not simply materials to make the insulation, but if you look at all the materials which are used inside buildings, they all have in common that they are obtained by high temperature processes, 1,000 degrees and more. So the first question you can ask is, can I save energy to make these materials? The second question I can ask is that, can I decarbonate the energy source? Now, some of our processes are using carbonates. Carbonates are certain minerals, and of course, in carbonates you have CO3, and no surprise, when you are using carbonate and gas, you are obtaining CO2 as a byproduct. So you really want to change possibly the resource in raw materials, but you can also think, if I want to decrease the CO2 footprint of materials, if you take metals, metals do not exist in the everyday lives, do not exist in nature, apart from gold, which exists as a pure metal, but you know gold is almost useless. I mean, it's just to make jewelry and some connection into microelectronics. Most of metals exist as oxides. The combination of a metal with an oxygen is difficult to break, and that's why you need a lot of energy to break that. Now, can we recycle materials? It's much better to take something which is a metal and recycle it as metal than going back to the oxide and transform the oxide into metal. So you have three pictures here, one which is a calcination furnace for gypsum, another one which is a steel maker, and the third one is a way of processing glass. So I'm going to finish by two examples, gypsum and plasterboard. When you make plasterboard, you do that with gypsum, and the way you do it is quite interesting. I mean, you put water, you remove water by cooking the hydrate of calcium sulfate. You cook that in order to have a hemihydrate. Now, when you have done that, you put it back in water. So you remove water to put it back in water, and at the end, of course, you need to dry your plasterboard. So you remove water again. So you remove it, put it, remove it. You feel that we can probably do better. How can we heat efficiently? How can we make the transformation of the material in such a way that the back and forth between hydrated and non-hydrated is more efficient? Now, next one is a case of glass. The glass you start from sand. The sand is silica. Silica has a very high melting point. If you want to make glass, you mix it with something which has which is going to lower the melting point, and this something is a sodium carbonate or limestones. And these components are making the melting point lower, which means that the energy is going to be lower. So it's still high temperature processes. When you make a glass, a float glass for the windows, you are going to operate at 1,200 Celsius or something like that. How can you decrease the CO2 footprint of that? You can replace the carbonates. You can decarbonate the heating. Currently it's done with gas. You can try to do that with hydrogen, not easy. You can try to do that with electricity, not easy either. You can try to do that with biogas. It's not easy either. So that's the kind of thing you cannot just simply decide that you are going to decrease, but you really need to try to do it in practice. So typically for the float glass, the place where you are really going to decarbonate the thing is the region in which you are melting the sand together with the fondant. Now, decarbonated heating, again, a number of options. You can try to go to biogas, and then very rapidly you find the situation that how much biogas do I have available to do that? You can try to do hydrogen, how much hydrogen is available to do that, and you can electrify, and then there is a number of difficulties into electrifications of the float glass. So what I want to tell you is that when you are in an industry, you shouldn't think of your industry alone. When there are competing resources, you have to see what will be the best use of each of your resources. And if you are using biogas, is it better to use biogas for the glass making, or is it better to use biogas to make fuels I think the answer is pretty clear, but that's the kind of answers you have to ask yourself, both as industry and as citizen. Now, the recycled glass, and I want to finish with that, you all know that you can recycle the bottles of glass. That's what you do when you put them in the appropriate landfill. You can recycle the bottle as bottles. That's what they do in England for milk. You can recycle bottle as crushed glass, and you can also try to recycle the glass of the windows or the glass, what is called the cullet, which is broken glass inside the plants. Now, sounds like that, it sounds very simple. You say, I'm going to recycle the glass. And of course, the melting point is lower than the melting point of silica. But the problem is that the requirement on the glass is not the same for bottles and for windows. It's not the same for windows and for windshields. And this transparency is going to impose you things on the composition of the glass, which means that you can recycle your glass bottle, but you will never make glass windows with these glass bottles. So you see the number of things which are appearing here, which are no longer, they are driven by the technology, but they are not only technology. One question of recycling is very much related to the logistics. How do I recycle the bottles? Or do I go back to the fields in order to get the glass and so on? So that's basically what I wanted to give you as examples of how do we do the CO2 footprint down in a big industry with a big application, which is basically the application in buildings. Thank you for your attention.
So thanks a lot for your presentation. I think one very nice thing was that you gave a lot of examples, so I think it was very easy to understand, and I hope everyone got something out of it. So the way we'll do it is Pedro and I will start with 2 questions each, and then we will give the space to the room. So prepare your questions, and I'm sure the guests will be happy to answer them on any topic related to decarbonization of industry. So I have the first question to start with. Professor Fontecave, you talked about the Stratégie Nationale Bas Carbone, and you talked about the fact that we should multiply by 2 the electrification of industry to try to reach that objective, which means around 6 nuclear plants. So having that in mind, it feels a bit complicated for the industry, because it means that you need to trust the government to have the 6 nuclear plants on the other side. And so I think a lot of people in the room and a lot of people online might ask themselves, how does it work? How does the collaboration between the government and the industry works so that there is trust and so that you can plan for the future, given that in politics a lot of things can change very quickly?
Indeed, electrification, and Yves mentioned several other examples, electrification is one key to decarbonation. So, and at the same time, electrification of hydrogen production, steel production, glass production is not easy. And developing new processes using electricity, low carbon electricity in place of fossil fuels is already a very high challenge. That's why it's not going as fast as we hope. The good example is hydrogen. So people have worked on green hydrogen for a while, and still more than 99% in the world, it's 95% in the developed countries, of hydrogen is based on methane and not on electricity and water. Still, electrification is also difficult. But this is the business of the industry. The government has nothing to do with this. I mean, this is our technical problem, industrial problem, economical problem, and the scenario is quite clear. I mean, the industry has to electrify this. That's the first aspect. The second aspect is of course, that the industry says, okay, if I succeed in developing these processes, then I need electricity, so I need more electricity. Electricity is already used. I mean, you have to know that electricity accounts for 17% in energy consumption in the world. It's only a part of our energy problem. In France, which is one of the most electrified countries, we are at about 25%. But nevertheless, if we electrify the transport, you add 100 terawatt hours more. If you electrify the industry, you add 50 terawatt hours more. If you add, so you electrify hydrogen. So, of course, the government has to help by its policy, by subsidize, by an energetic policy, as to push the industry of energy. I mean, the companies that make solar panels, the companies that make wind panels, the wind plants, the companies that make solar energy, to develop new capacities of electricity. But even this is difficult. Why? I mean, first, because you can install huge amount of wind and solar plants. It's not safe, because during the night you have no solar energy, and when there is no wind, you have no wind energy. The second thing is that we have stopped making nuclear plants, and we have to restart the nuclear industry. And I mean, Yves will talk about it much better than me, but it has not started yet. I mean, and we have this problem with the Flamanville EPR, which took a lot of time and is very expensive. But we have to do new nuclear plants. So it's a very difficult dialogue between electricity production and electricity consumption. What is the reality today? The reality that we say we have to electrify massively the sectors, but in contrast to the scenario that I showed, we are in a period where we consume less and less electricity. And furthermore, the production of electricity has not increased much. So the electrification process is much more difficult than what we expected. That's my opinion. And the last thing I want to say is that most of these processes, which will depend on electricity, for example, hydrogen, I mean, the cost of this new technology is mainly electricity. It's not so much the capital cost, it's not so much the catalyst or the materials, it's the electricity price which account for most of the cost of this new technology. So if we are not able to produce electricity, low carbon electricity, at low cost, then we will not electrify anything. So I think this is the major point. And of course, you since you are talking about the dialogue between industry and the government, you have heard the last days that the government, the new government in France, has decided to increase the taxes on the electricity. Of course, they need money. I mean, we all need to save money. I mean, France is in a very difficult economical situation. But this is going really against the energetic transition. It is going against the electrification. The price of electricity today is too high to make this new technology appearing soon. Maybe, yeah, please, if you can.
Okay, so if I can go on this point, well, in fact, in my former life, I see closely what was the relation of industry with the government. I think there are two things that you have to keep in mind. The very first thing is that when you think that the speech is replacing the action, when you think that the speech doesn't even need to be coherent, and that there, as a consequence, you don't have to consider that you have given your word that you should keep it, it's very difficult for an industry to trust a government. So that's the very first thing. The trust will come back when we come back to the idea that the speech implies action and implies commitment. So that's the first thing. The second thing, when we think of energy, I think we have to clearly state what is the energy needed for. If you consider that you're perfectly happy with a country which is a sort of attraction park, which is populated with retirement places, you can do exactly the kind of electricity, of energy programs that we have been seeing in the last 15 years. If you think that you need an industry which is producing things, in that case, that's not the same thing to provide electricity or energy for a house, for a village, or for a big factory. Therefore, you have to consider what type of electricity you need for each of these applications. I mean, putting solar panels on the roof of a house makes perfect sense, apart from the fact that you are going to buy it from China. But it makes sense because you know that if you can store the energy, you know what are the technologies to store this electricity efficiently. Now, if you make big farms and you make eolian farms and you have to put that on a network, then that's another problem because the massive storage of electricity is something which is just not available. So that means that you really have to analyze what is the purpose of your energy and what are the consequences of the decision you have to make. Now, once you have done this analysis, the decision you have to make, they are committing the country for something between 30 to 60 years. You cannot change at any presidential election. So I think that's one thing which is absolutely key about the relation between industry and governments in terms of energy provision.
So thank you for your answers. So keeping up a bit talking about the parts of electricity, I'd like to ask both of you if you think if it's feasible to achieve a fully electrified industrial sector across not only France but at a EU level without relying on nuclear energy, because we see debates on the one hand France and some countries defending the use of the nuclear energy, whereas we have countries like Germany who are closing down nuclear factories and seem to be regressing and opening up again coal mines, for instance. So given this increased reliance on coal, how does this suggest that only renewable energy alone may not be sufficient for large-scale electrification?
Should I start or should you start?
You can start.
Okay. Again, let's put it that way. Renewable energies are all fine, provided you have a joint analysis of the network you are putting them into and on the storage that you need to make this network stable. That's something which is absolutely key. The things which are stabilizing the network are basically gas plants, coal plants, and you can do that with hydroelectricity. And pretending that you can use the nuclear power plants in order to match with the fluctuation of the renewable energy is just cheating. I mean, that's not done for that. I mean, that's done to make a base, okay? Now, we have seen, speaking of not being rational, we have seen in the last 15 years an enormous amount of money which was spent in order to decarbonize an electricity which was already decarbonized. I mean, which doesn't make sense. If you make a windmill in Denmark, that makes sense because most of their electricity was coming from a coal plant. And about the intermittency that you have in Denmark, it's dealt with by the proximity of Norway, which has an enormous amount of storage facilities because of the hydroelectricity. So there is nothing in any place like a magic wand. You really have to analyze case by case what is the most suitable source of electricity. So that's for the source of electricity. Now, saying if we are going to electrify all the industrial processes, I just don't believe it's going to be true. I think there are a number of processes which can be electrified. There are other processes which are very difficult to electrify. And I see them even within the company Saint-Gobain. We have some processes that we know how to electrify. It's going to be more costly, but we are ready to do it. And some processes, it's much more difficult. So saying that just because there is a ministry decision, we are going to electrify everything, I mean, that's not an engineering statement. That's a communication statement.
If I can complete the answer, I mean, we have suffered in the last 10, 15 years of two stupid ideas that were promoted, including by state agencies, which is the possibility that our energy could be 100% electrical, which is, I mean, he's told that this is ridiculous. But then it has an implication is that even, I said that France is 25%. So about, to simplify, 500 terawatt hours. If we would double it, this would make a big proportion of electricity in our energy. But this is already a fantastic challenge to electrify at that level. But still, we will not be able to electrify everything. So the implication is that, what is the rest? The rest is something that is not electrical, which is today provided by fossil fuels. It's very easy. I mean, you take oil, you burn it, and you have energy. And not to do electricity. I mean, the cars is the example, the thermal cars. That's the first. So how to find this non-electrical energy? Again, biomass with all the problem of availability and so on, and very complicated. The second stupid idea is that the electricity could be 100% renewable since the hydroelectricity is only a part, so most of it would be intermittent, solar and wind. This is also a ridiculous idea because this doesn't work anywhere and will not work anywhere for many reasons that Yves has already developed, considering storage problems, network, electrical network problems, and so on. Then you immediately see that the scenarios on which the state works today are, that's my opinion, unrealistic. And they have not been built on the basis of what Yves mentioned, I mean, impact analysis, feasibility, dialogue with industry, dialogue with technology, and so on. It's a very simple way to do scenarios. You say, we need to go beyond 1.5 degree increased temperature as compared to the pre-industrial temperature. So it means basically zero carbon in 2050. So then we draw lines from where we are down to zero, and that's what you have seen here. And this is just ridiculous. Actually, if you look you see this curve here. No, this one. You see in green, I think it's light green is transport. So transport is a good part of the emissions, and the energy consumption is today mainly oil, kerosene for the planes, and so on. And you see 2050 would be zero. But this is ridiculous because even the electric... Do you know how much CO2 emission is saved with an electrical car? Do you know that? Do you think that an electrical car is zero carbon? No, it's not zero carbon. So in France, with our highly decarbonized electricity that we have today, and thanks to nuclear energy, we gain 2/3. So we still have to deal with one third of the emission per kilometer. So even an electrical car is not zero carbon. So how can we have this kind of curve? I don't understand that. So, I mean, this is to give some, trend. We have to indeed limit our emissions, but it will take much more time than this. You agree? You agree, Yves?
Yes. Thank you. In many sustainability courses that we could have at ESCP or like on the TV or whatever, when we see people promoting sustainability, there's this idea that it could also bring opportunities, and we could make a parallel with finance, for example, where we say that, well, usually companies try to be more sustainable and think that it might attract more money. So do you think at the scale of the decarbonization or defossilization of industry, do you think there are also opportunities, or does it only represent a cost?
Okay, I can start. Obviously, bringing new technology on the market are opportunities of new jobs, new industries, new companies, and so on. So revitalizing the industry sector with all this new technology is quite exciting. The problem is that, again, it is an opportunity if we are able to solve the scientific, technological problems, and this will take time. I don't say, I mean, we will solve the problem. In some cases, we will solve the problem. In some cases, we will not. And it will take more time than we said in general. And the second thing is that, of course, all this technology will go onto the market only if they are reasonably not too expensive. Or for the moment, it's not the case. That's a problem. Again, making hydrogen from water is something that we know how to do it. I mean, it has been done 100 years ago. I mean, electrolysis is not a new technology, but it's still 4 times more expensive than the hydrogen that we make from methane. So it's not an opportunity today. So the economical problem is key. So we have to work on that. So it is the responsibility for the government, for the state, to contribute an energy policy at the national and European level, of course. I mean, we are within Europe, which provides energy at low cost. If it's not the case, the new technology, in particular those which require electricity, will not come down to the market soon. Later.
Yeah, I'm going to sound very old-fashioned, but I assume it. I think an opportunity, you can interpret that 2 ways. It can be an opportunity of making money. And certainly, there are opportunities of making money with green technologies. That's called greenwashing. It works perfectly well. You can plea, or we're talking with your banker, I'm going to do, everything is going to be green, and therefore you can give me money because it's fashionable. Okay, that's one thing. But there is something which I think is much more profound. I mean, the world of tomorrow is the one that you are going to build. The world of tomorrow, if you want it to be sustainable, we have to take into account that there is an increasing demography of people who want to have access to a number of facilities. And therefore, in order to do that, we need both to have a proper treatment of energy and the CO2 footprint of our industries. And we need also a second thing, which is circular economy. We have to do it seriously. I mean, it's not a joke I mean, sustainability is not a joke, just like responding to the oil crisis in 1973 was not a joke. It was absolutely necessary at the time for the life of industrial economies in Europe. And that's the way the response was made. Here, it's absolutely necessary for the life of industrial economy on the world. So I mean, that's something we don't have to cheat with. We really have to think, among all the possible things which are claimed, what are the ones which are feasible and at what cost? And I think saying it's an opportunity just because you can get momentarily some subsidies to plant windmills wherever they are is not the proper way of addressing the problem. The proper way of addressing the problem is to say, what do we have to do so that this earth is going to be livable for the next generation?
There is another aspect. I don't know if we will have time to discuss it later, but it's all this story of moving towards decarbonized technologies in the industry rely also on the availability of competences and expertise, which mean that we need that for France, but for other countries the same. I mean, that the young people in school, in universities, and so on, find this objective of doing part of the energy transition is something very exciting, and then they learn science and technology, and second, they also want to contribute to the industry. So the industry really needs these competences. So there is a the opportunities again in this domain. I mean, the energetic transition will be comment dire? I mean, will come up only if there is a mobilization of these competences, and then we should believe in the industry. I'm myself doing in my lab at the Collège de France very basic science, but I'm sure that what I'm trying to do will come on the market only if the industry will put it. I will not put anything on the market myself. And I will do it, and the industry will put it in the market if some students really want to learn science and technology and go to work in the industry. And I know that there is a problem here, because there is some kind of ideology also that the solution is to stop everything and not to go in this direction of research, innovation, technology, industry. And of course, we need to remobilize the population, and in particular the young population, that this is essential for better living in the future.
I would just like to add one word. I mean, we are in a commerce school, as far as I know. I mean, one thing which is absolutely key when you'll be working, some of you in industry, is that in order to go through this tradition, to do it for true, research will be required. And always keep in mind that research is not a line of cost, it's a line of investment. That's absolutely key to have that in mind.
So my question actually was a bit following what you just mentioned. We know that the the relationship between government and industry is as it is, but I'd like to explore a bit further this part of the relationship between research and industry. Is the industry starting to pay more attention to what's being doing in the research? Is the relationship between industry and research growing now because of the things sometimes the government imposes, or is it just a natural trend because of efficiency and decarbonization, defossilization?
I mean, we can both answer. I leave Yves starting. We have different perspective, but interestingly, I'm really from. I mean, now today I am from the basic science, but having industrial partners, and Yves is now having an important job in industry, and also this industry has many collaboration with university labs and so on. So maybe you can start.
Yeah, in fact, I'm old enough to have seen the time where it was still almost a devil to interact between industry and universities. And it was changing at the time. It was changing, and it has changed a lot. I mean, in the 70s, working with industry was just having a pact with the devil. And in engineering sciences and in physics and mathematics, I mean, the connection has been, and I think it's probably the same in life sciences, the connection has been progressively growing. And there are two reasons for that. Of course, there is always the reason I need some money to do my research. Okay, that's one reason. But there is another reason, which is when you start from practical problem, there is always very interesting science to be done. And when you do some fundamental science, it's always rewarding to see that it can be used for something. And I mean, this evolution has gone more and more, and it comes now the relation between industry, at least the industry I practice, the industry of materials, and academia is reasonably simple. I mean, we are not asking the academia to do our job, and they don't pretend to do ours. And in that case, if everybody does his job properly and is looking at the problems, saying, well, how can we contribute to solve the problem? An engineer is, as I said, is someone who is trying to understand in order to make, whereas a scientist is trying to understand in order to understand. But in both cases, you have understanding. And that has driven a situation where the connection between industry and academia is better and better.
Yeah, it's better. It's still not perfect.
Of course.
we can do more, but I take an example. I am my students and PhDs and postdocs in my lab are spending their life like me to try to make what I mentioned as e-fuel, electrical fuels, converting CO2 into ethanol or ethylene, which will end up as polymers or fuels and so on. Everything we are doing is for, at the end, getting on the market. But as I said, I will not go in the market myself. And it's much better if a company or several companies are from the beginning in partnership with this project. And that's the case in my lab. So I'm doing research with this partnership, industrial partnerships. The advantage is also that today one of my PhD student was having his defense, and after the defense, he is a very brilliant chemist. After his defense, he told me that he got an offer from Air Liquide, the company. So that's the perfect thing. So we actually did not work during his PhD with Air Liquide. It was with Veolia, another company. So, but yeah, so we this is a fantastic way to work, I think. And the second thing is that who has the money today? The state?
Not me.
The government, the French state? Of course not. They have nothing. They have negative money. We have negative money, public money. So my project, for example, and it's true from my colleagues, will not exist if I had only public money. There isn't. And my research is really basic. So it means also that with the change that Yves mentioned, even the companies support basic research because the best understand that that's where they will get opportunities, as you said. And yeah, so my budget in my lab, and it is Collège de France. You imagine this is well known as very basic science. My budget is principally from industry.
But I would reverse the question. I would say, for me, the evolution between academic research and industry has strengthened a lot in the last 40 years. But now, one thing which I think is still weak, still too weak, is the connection between, that within industry, the connection between R&D in industry and marketing. It's really not easy to have the proper translation, what are the need of the market, into the word, into what kind of research we should be doing. And I think for your generation, that will be a major transition to be made. The same way there has been a transition, a continuum between basic research to applied research, I think we will need to have a transition, a continuum between R&D, industrial R&D, and market needs. And of course, if your answer is I don't want to be more innovative than my clients, I mean that's just you lose everybody there. Now, if you think that the very great incentives is precisely when you are able to find a need which is not explicit yet, and to tell to your researchers how to do this, and how to be able to visit the research labs and to say, well, from what I see, the research lab, but you need to work, because it's not always easy. But you need also to have people who are ready to talk with you. And I think this thing is still to be done. And the third thing, which is, to my understanding, really to be done, is the connection between science, industry, and public decision. I mean, the work has to be done. The work has been diluted in the last 30 years in a way which is not admissible. So again, this third part is really something which for me is much more crucial than a link which is very strong now between industry and academia from the science viewpoint.
All right, thanks a lot. So maybe we can pass the mic through the room. Do we have any questions? Okay, we have one. Hugo, could you take the mic here?
Hi, I have a few questions. I wanted to ask, how do you think rare minerals would work when it comes to decarbonization?
What?
Rare minerals, like for a tech industry, like rare earth minerals.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I can take this one. Okay. I think the rare earth problem is clearly a problem. It's a problem for hard magnets and so on. But one thing I would like to make clear is that we are obsessed by rare minerals, by rare materials. And we are just totally forgetting about all the other materials which are critical. So the thing which is very important is to make the distinction between the things which are critical and the things which are crucial, which you cannot avoid having. I mean, when you think that, when you dream of having an autonomous car without having the steel to make the car, you are dreaming aloud. Nobody will ever tell you that steel is critical, but it is. So I think the point is to take industry one by one and to see what are the materials which are absolutely key for that, and not simply rely on what the latest journalist has said about this material. Oh, I know that's all Chinese and therefore we are dead. There are plenty of materials that are in this situation. I mean, we think of lithium, you think of... but I tell you something as simple as copper. I mean, if we electrify the economy, we will need an enormous amount of copper to transport electricity. This copper is in limited resources. That means that we'll need to recycle this copper. And I think this material, which seems very obvious, copper, is something which is going to be very important. If you think of all what is stated about the renewable energies by the year 2050, basically the amount of copper, aluminium, steel required to make what is claimed to be made by 2050 is about 3 to 8 times the world production of this material in 2010. So just to tell you that there is a major issue which will come, which is the recycling of these materials. So I think rather than being over-focused on one class of material, we should really try to have a broad view of the quantity of material which will be required and the need we have to have a circular economy. For me, it's a key issue. A circular economy is, as much as possible, is as important as reducing the CO2 footprint.
Yeah, I may add that I agree, but it's true that there will be an increased pressure on availability of these metals. Not only the rare earths, but a lot of metals. This has several implications. The first one is about sovereignty.
Okay, yep.
We have to indeed analyze the situation and see that some countries, in particular China, which is making a lot of efforts to be very strong in refining these metals, so buying all the metals all over the world and refining and sell them. So we have to consider that maybe we should do better and not depend on exclusively on a few countries, China in particular. This of course is very important because we are already concerned by the fact that we are dependent on fossil fuels that we don't have in France, and we have to buy. We are dependent on other countries. So if we replace this dependency by other dependencies, it's not fantastic. So this means that we should reconsider the mining industry in our country, in Europe. And we have stopped a lot of that. And this is a very important issue. Will we be able to accept that we make holes in our country? So far, every hole you make, you create a ZAD, a zone à défendre, and everything is stopped. The second thing is that, and that's really nice for science and technology, and Yves has already mentioned several aspects of that, the circularity of the economy, is there are a lot of research and nice research and basic understanding and new technology to recover all these metals, not from the mine, but from the environment, I mean, from the society, and recycle them. And there are very interesting scientific questions. It's very difficult, of course, because you dilute the metals and you have to so energetically it's difficult. But there is a new science to create that we have not yet really addressed, I think, which is recycling metals.
Okay.
Just one more thing. I mean, that's again, I'm talking to people who are much more aware of economy than I am. You have to keep in mind that the price is not everything. I mean, there are a number of situations where the geopolitics is as important as the price. And one case I know pretty well is the case of uranium for nuclear power plants. I mean, we have 4 production of uraniums in the world. One is Kazakhstan. Well, I'm not absolutely sure I would like to buy uranium in Kazakhstan. The second one is Nigeria. I mean, obviously, we are not welcome in Nigeria. The last 2 ones are Australia and Canada. Australia and Canada are friendly countries. Now, just imagine if we are in tension with this resource in the next 20 years, who do you think is going to be served first? Europe or United States or China? I mean, it seems pretty clear for me that we have to think of becoming independent of the mining. And that's exactly why we have to think of closing the fuel cycle. So you see, that's not simply a question of cost, it's a question of geopolitics. And
would it be the States then, because it's in North America, or?
I think that would be the States first,
Yeah.
for Canada, the States.
Okay.
And for Australia, I think when you have a neighbor like China, you'd better be in good relation with this neighbor. I mean, just an idea. So I'm thinking that might not come before 2050, but that's a question we have to address right now. And we have to think of the way of having this resource coming from the resource we have already used. And I think that's going to be, the circular economy is not simply a question of well-being with the planet. That's also a question of sovereignties of our economies. And that's why I think we really have to think it carefully. But again, that's something that has to be thought now for something which is going to develop in the last 30 years. So long term is a key issue for these questions.
Okay, I've got another question. So the other one is a lot of companies are working on ESG reports, and at least in Europe, like in France or in Swiss, they're looking into a CSRD and a CSRDDD. How do you think it's corporate social responsibility directives or corporate social responsibility directive and so on? And how do you think decarbonization could be written in those reports, for example?
Joker. No, I mean, that's clearly in the things which are asked to the companies. I mean, just to include the fact that you are decarbonizing the company, that you are making a better use of matter and so on. But that doesn't solve the problem of engineering of doing it.
Yeah,
That tells you should be doing it.
Because that's the industry that I'm going into, a tech industry, and they're working on CSRD of like, oh, what can we follow within the EU laws to work with this tech company? And yeah, that was just the question that I had, basically.
Well, we tell it, but the point is, what are we doing? And I think really, I mean, there is a different issue, is that what is announced and what is done. So I think we really have to, at least the thing I can tell you, that when we commit to be zero neutral in 2050, I cannot assure you that we are going to be able to do that, but can assure you that all the R&D in the group is working in this direction, has made a number of progress in this direction. So again, that's always a question of do not mix up the goal and the path. And what you put inside your requirement here is something which is at what stage you are in this path.
Yes.
Go on. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I have some question on what you said about like typically public decisions and conflicting usage between resources, because if you have like problems on availability, and you might have amongst different like type of usage, and considering like your experience from what you see on the state of democracy right now, the real ability of the state to really like make a policy, how do you see like our society like try to be able to hierarchize your type of like prioritize type of need and have this kind of democratic discussion, considering like the low level of knowledge on all the topics based on energy, industry, and so on. Do you see like trying to build altogether a society where we try to prioritize what matters most, when many times actually we spend a lot of energy or resources on stuff that are not that important?
Okay.
I can. Yeah, it's a very important question, which is in this more and more complex world, especially for the energy transition. How can we combine expertise, real expertise, with experts knowing the field, public decisions, and democracy, and how people can tell what they want on a topic that is very complex, for which they don't know much. And this is a real problem. I'm myself asking very often how we can do that. It is indeed very complicated. You can answer, okay, we need more and more educated people. That's certainly useful, but we will never educate people at the level requested to tell us, I need this particular technology for nuclear plants and not the other one. I mean, this is just impossible. So, furthermore, you need political deciders to know a little bit about it. and the reality they don't know about it. I mean, they are educated in Sciences Po or École Nationale d'Administration. They have not a single minute of scientific education, even though it has changed a little bit, I've heard recently. But you know, I'm very, it has not been mentioned, but I am the president of the Energy Committee of the Academy of Sciences. So by this position, I'm quite often invited by political parties to discuss energy transition policies and so on. What I realized that they know very little about it. I mean, recently I talked to one, I will not name the guy, but you know, everybody knows him. And he didn't know the difference between power and energy. It may seem not so important, but it's very important, actually, if you want to understand. So, yeah, so it's very difficult. I have no solution. I would say that the government will not know will not know much about technically the energy problem, but there is a lot of expertise around, and the Academy of Sciences is one of those institutions to which the government can with which the government can discuss. If I have a few more seconds, I would say I would tell you the following story. In 2012, when François Hollande was elected, Sébastien Candel at that time was president of the Academy of Sciences, and we went together visit François Hollande and his scientific advisors, and we said, okay, we remind you that you have an Academy of Sciences. We are open, of course, to provide anything you ask. We are ready. Please do not hesitate. I ask you the question, after 5 years, how many times the president and his advisors asked the Academy of Sciences some ideas or some reports? How many times? 0. Exactly. It was the same with the next president. And it happened that in 2024, the cabinet of Emmanuel Macron asked the Academy a report on hydrogen, on the hydrogen economy. We have published it. It's a nice report, I think, not only because I contributed to it, but you can have access to it on the website of the Academy. So you see, it's also a kind of cultural thing. So we really need to some extent our deciders, political deciders, either to know a little bit about the problems or to really rely on the expertise that is available. It's the minimum that we can request, but as you have seen with the story that I told you, that they don't do it so much. So there is a lot in this context. There is a lot of possibility to ideological positions to come up, to integrate the decisions, to integrate the agency, the state agency, and make the pressure to get their ideas in the first line. And this is what happened in the recent years in the field of energy. And I finish to say that as for democracy, I don't think that we can make a referendum on whether we do small nuclear reactors or big ones or EPR. It will never happen, and fortunately, it's the case. So, yeah, we have a parliament. We have elected people there. These are those who have to get advised by expertise and vote. I don't see anything else than that. Never any citizen will have all the knowledge to tell what is the best technology.
I would listen to your question in two ways. The first way is the question of the political decision itself. And I don't think that's needed that a political decider is a scientist. It's not needed that he knows about science. It's needed that he knows that it is important. And you have a very nice example, which is the Mesmer Plan. It was decided by Georges Pompidou, who was a grammarian, and his prime minister was a lawyer. None of them were scientists, but they knew that it was important, and they had a very good staff of people to counsel them. So that's one thing which is very important, and in addition, they had the sense of what was the common good, which is something which is key. So that was the first thing. The second thing, and I think that's the key issue, I mean, the expertise is available. The question is you need your political leaders to be convinced that this expertise should be used. You have an example, which is the group of scientists which is around the President of the United States. In the time of Obama, it worked remarkably well. And then it became a sort of ghost village in the times of Trump. So I think the key issue is what is the need which is felt by the politician, because if he really feels the need, he will find a way. Now, if we think of dealing with the people, I think I'm going to give you two examples. I mean, one of which I've seen recently. I'm sometimes giving speeches in my Burgundy. I have a country house in Burgundy. And it really tells me that when you really take time to talk with people, they're asking you the right questions. I mean, Montesquieu used to say, I love to talk with my peasants because they are not knowledgeable enough to reason in the wrong way. I mean, they are asking you the right question, provided you take time to talk with them. And the second point, if you really want to have the advice of people, you should put them into a situation in which they can talk to you. And there is a very nice case which was done which is exactly the counterexample of what we are doing with the so-called public debate in France. That's the way they dealt with the nuclear waste in Sweden. The nuclear waste in Sweden, I knew the guy who was head of the company was dealing with that. During something like 15 years, he was spending 3 evenings every week to come with his engineers, to talk with the population. And he told me, I never made a meeting with more than 20 people. So there is a tactical reason. The tactical reason is that if you have 2 people out of 20 who don't want the debate to take place, then 18 other ones tell them, shut up, we want to listen. If you have 20 people out of 200, they are perfectly able to ruin any kind of meeting. That's exactly what the public debate organization is doing. Now, the second thing, it is less tactical, and I think much deeper. I mean, you know, the Nordic people have an old tradition in democracy. I mean, when they decided to burn a monastery in the Middle Ages, they would decide that democratically. But anyway, the way he told me that if you really want to listen to people, you should put them in a situation where they can talk to you. And that's not the same people who are going to talk in front of 20 people or are going to talk in front of 200 people. And I think that's something we have to relearn. Democracy is to put people in a situation where they can talk, express what they want, and you can listen to them. That's something we have completely lost, and that's something we have to rediscover if we really want to have a democracy which is based on some rational approaches.
Just to add some more things on the topic, and to show you how much even the current president, Emmanuel Macron, is with this question. He has addressed this question in 2 different ways, very different, I would say contradictory ways, and I will tell you how, which is maybe his classical en même temps strategy. But if you take the COVID situation, in that case, he created a committee, a scientific committee, he asked our president, Alain Fischer, the president of the Academy of Sciences today, he asked Alain Fischer to be on top of that. And there was a scientific committee with experts. And it worked very well. So the experts said what they had to say, and the president and the government decided, even in some case, not following the scientific committee, because there are other parameters to take into account, not only health knowledge, but also economy, social problems, and so on. And in my opinion, this worked very fine. I wrote it actually in my book, saying that this was a good way to combine decision, political decision, and expertise. On the other hand, he might not have created a new structure because expertise was available elsewhere without creating a committee. I mean, at the Academy of Sciences, at the CNRS, at the INSERM, and at Pasteur Institute, and so on. But nevertheless, this was quite fine. And at the same time, which is a translation of en même temps, at the same time, in the case of the climate and energy problems, he invented this, maybe some of you will not agree with me, but that's my position. He invented this Convention Citoyenne pour le Climat with this idea, giving the idea that it was enough to select 150 people in the whole population and let them, without any knowledge, to define a policy for climate and energy, and bypassing actually the parliament. I'm myself very much for the representative democracy, so I didn't like it so much, and I think this is not the proper way. But one can see the problematics, how to give citizens some place in the decision, but I don't think that this is the way we should do. Again, we have a lot of elections in this country, even when it is not needed. And we have many opportunities as a citizen to express ourselves. There is a parliament, and I think we are well equipped to allow people to express their opinions in different ways. And
Hello. Thank you so much, first of all, to Marc and Yves for this fascinating conversation today, especially the intersection of science, research, industry, and politics, which was very interesting to listen to your wise suggestions on how the tomorrow should be. My question is a bit related to what I just see on the screen, where we see that even in 2050, you have a question mark and you say almost zero carbon. So connecting that with the marketing that's going on today in the industry, especially with communication, which you did slightly touch upon before, where everyone is talking about their net zero emission target in 2030 and what they're doing towards it, which is probably more like a propaganda or jumping into the greenwashing bandwagon in order to say. What is, in your opinion, should be the industrial or the communication corrective action which puts into light the reality of the situation today? Is there supposed to be a sort of a governing body, like we have a regulatory body for banks? Should there be a certain governing institution, though it has to be European Commission in this perspective, but something more particular, which is going to be the police who's going to look and correct the communication and show the reality and have realistic effort that the industry should make towards this transition? And what is, in your opinion, happening in this point of view in the governing body, and what's the evolution there, and where do you see it going? Thank you.
I can try on this one. The first thing is to be honest. I mean, we shouldn't claim that we have solved the problem when we have solved the problem in specific conditions, in very precise situations which cannot be scaled up. So you should announce it, say, well, we are able to make a zero CO2 glass, but within certain conditions in which we are working with full cullet, in which we are working with biogas and so on, and we cannot scale up this one, but at least we can see how this one can help us to the next step. So I think the thing to be stated clearly is what is a step and what is a final success. We are not in the situation in any case where we have the final success, but we have a number of steps to do that. Now, the question of how it should be controlled. I mean, the very first thing to be controlled is to stop asking people things which are not feasible. I mean, you can control people when they are in a route which is possible, not in a route which is dreamt. And I think the problem is that when you give goals to people by legislation, I mean, just think of the European commitments that are made for the electric car. Yeah, I mean, nobody is really believing that. And yeah, then you can make investigation about the way it is fulfilled, but you start with a lie and you're checking how much the other ones are lying. I think we have to get out of that and to come to the situation to give goals which are accessible with the current technologies or evolution of the current technologies, because we are in a case of emergency. Being in a case of emergency means that you use the technologies which are available. You are not dreaming of technologies which would be working. You work on them, but you're not relying on them. And if you give yourself goals which are attainable, then it makes very much sense to make this checking. But I can tell you I've been 6 years High Commissioner for Atomic Energy and supposedly counseling the government. I've never seen, never, ever, while I was asking it on a constant basis, an evaluation what was the effect of the decision which were made on the CO2 footprint. Never. So now, if you want the state to be able to check things, the very first thing is that the state should make a measurement of the consequence of the decision it's making. If not, it will be blah, blah, blah.
If I can add a comment. In fact, I mean, what you say in this data that you see here on the screen and so on reflects the fact that, in my opinion, a big mistake of the Paris Agreement, I dare to say it, actually I said it to Laurent Fabius a few days ago, the biggest problem of the Paris Agreement is to have given precise numbers. 1.5 degrees in 2100 and zero carbon in 2050 without any strong basis. And from then, it has become a kind of religion, a dogma, and nobody knew if it was possible or not, but this was given to everybody. And since we are not really on the direction, everybody complains, and everyone say, okay, I will do it. I'm member of several scientific committees of companies, and I tell them that they should be very careful in telling that they will do it in 2050. Actually, when their competitors is saying, I will do it in 2043, the day after they say, myself, I will do it in 2041, and so on and so forth. So it's just because the Paris Agreement has given these two numbers. And since then, we have not re-evaluated this in terms of is it feasible or not, what are the limitations, what are the problems. I mean, the main problem, it is global. If some countries do it, but some other cannot do it, then the CO2 in the atmosphere will be the same. So I think that the big problem, and that's why the companies themselves, they have to be very careful, is that, you know, people are less and less confident in governments, in experts, and in the industry, in the companies. So if you announce something that you will never achieve, I mean, this lack of confidence will increase. And this is not good for the society. So I'm a bit upset by the fact that these are mainly, some you call it greenwashing or whatever, but it's not really greenwashing. It is really lacking courage to say the truth.
Hello. Hi. Good evening. Thank you very much for your talk. It was really, I forgot the word, but like it really brought a lot of thoughts and a lot of reflection. And coming from a genetic background and currently I'm in a Master of Science in Biopharmaceutical Management. So we're really like fully inside this decarbonization within the industry. And my question was, I saw on one of your slides the biosourced materials mentioned, and I'm super interested in that. And especially, for example, in pharmacy, we need a lot of molecules. In other industries as well, as you just mentioned, we really need to produce different kind of molecules as well. So I was wondering if you have any insights or if you have any opinion on biosourced materials, but also biosourced molecules, and how it can bring to the future and how it can bring to the future of the industry in general. Thank you.
I leave you the molecules, you give me the materials.
Yeah, just have a look on this figure here. You see 2050 in blue, it's the electricity. So the total, you see 1,600 terawatt hours is the total today. Tomorrow it will be less. This is also to be discussed, but anyway, the total will be less. The electricity will increase, it is in blue. And the gray is this part that I mentioned that because all will not be electrical, so a part will be non-electrical. And here in all scenarios, the biomass is invoked massively. So all these things here are coming from the biomass in many scenarios. So biogas, biofuels, bioethanol, biokerosene, and biosourced chemicals for the pharmaceutical industry, for the cosmetics, and so on. This is the gray part here. On this screen it looks small, but it's something close to 500 terawatt hours that today we do easily with petrol, but we cannot do with biomass so far. So we do a little bit. I mean, there are already biofuels, bioethanol in the cars, and so this is a real perspective in terms of research, development, innovation, and industry, and already, as I said, I mean, it's on the market, and the biogas, and so yes, it is an important part of the energy transition. The problem, and actually, you may have some detailed data on that, comes from a report that the Academy of Sciences and the Energy Committee has published very beginning of 2024. We have produced, I think, again, a nice document on biomass and its use for the energy transition. So I invite you to look at it on the website. There are many aspects of what I am deciding. But yes, it's true. It is a key aspect of the energy transition. The only problem, and then I stop, the only problem is, do we have enough of biomass to do all this gray stuff? And our conclusion is that probably not. So we have to select those sectors where we will use biomass because it's very appropriate, and some other sectors where it's not appropriate. And this is the key problem. And the biomass availability is limited for two reasons. One, because it's a carbon sink, and we should not too much burn it. And the second is because, of course, biomass is alimentation, and we cannot have too much of our surface just to do energy and not for providing food to people and animals. So that's why it is limited. About
biomaterials, biosourced materials, first I would take two aspects. There is the biosourced material, and there is the biological processes. So the biosourced material, I mean, scientists are not immune to fashion. I've had this study done concerning the insulating of the glass wool and the wool which is done from wood. Okay. Now, if you really want to look seriously at the CO2 footprint during the whole life cycle analysis of both, you find that the wool which is made out of wood, you need to put something to prevent the moisture, you need to add some things to prevent the fire, you need to add something to prevent the mice to eat it. And all these three things are going to make 25% in the weight of the wool. And when you look at the balance, the CO2 footprint of the wool made from wood and the wood made from glass, and you really need to do that on the whole life of the material. And one thing which will be dominant is the way you landfill it. Okay, so you see, that's something which has to be looked into the detail and not say, well, it's wood, therefore it's good. You have another example which goes again along the lines of who is going to control. I mean, you have a wonderful regulation about the carbon which is captured inside the concrete. So if you put some wood inside the concrete, you say I have a negative carbon because I have some wood inside the concrete. That's all fine. But anybody who has done some mechanics knows that wood is certainly less strong than the rock that you're making in the concrete. So if you replace the rock by wood, what you need to do is to add cement. So you have a concrete which is administratively green and which physically is much more CO2 intensive than the normal concrete. So you see, that's typically the thing. Regulations, bad regulations are worse than no regulation at all. Okay? And now there is a third aspect which I think is really interesting, is the case of materials, of biological processes. I mean, if you look at glass, the enemy of the glass maker is iron, because it makes the glass green. So it's extremely costly to remove the iron from sand. And we have a program which started in Saint-Gobain recently. I didn't believe in it. It told me we are going to have bacteria which are going to take the iron from the sand. It will work nicely. I say it will take ages, no way. And well, these bacteria are pretty clever. They just put the acidity precisely at the position where it's needed. And it's going much faster than I was expecting. So you see, I think there are things which are going to go there that way. And you have the last example, which is the bio-inspired materials. They are not bio-sourced. But you look at the efficiency of materials, you can take some inspiration in order to make new materials. But the key issue, the key idea is to take inspiration, not its bio-inspiration, not biomimetics. Because biomimetics, I think the best material to make a tree is still wood. Okay.
All right. Perhaps we will take one last question over there, because time is running.
Don't you think that one of the big problems of electricity is storage, especially in the area of mobility, and the most critical in the area of air traffic? Of course, there are solutions to use other energy sources like hydrogen, but my question is, do you think that there is possible to decrease drastically the weight of batteries? I think it would be and maybe it is, a very fascinating, challenging field of research.
Yeah, there are several aspects in what you say, because you are talking about storage, which is one thing, and the other thing is can we electrify all the mobilities, including airplanes and so on, and then you ended up with batteries. Where are the directions for improvement? Storage is absolutely. I mean, Yves mentioned it. It's absolutely key. There will not be a huge development of renewable intermittent energy if we don't have the technologies for storage at the high level, not the small batteries somewhere and so on. So at the very high level. So far, we are not able to do that. There are ideas about mega batteries. There are ideas about for interseasonal storage, storing during summer when we have a lot of sun and maybe wind and so on, and then making hydrogen and then using the hydrogen during winter. I mean, all these technology, we have them in mind, people work on it, but they are still not available. And actually, the reason why Denmark, for example, or Germany, which indeed have been very good at promoting wind and solar energy, they have still a huge emission of CO2 per kilowatt-hour of electricity produced, is because they, even though these guys are very clever and they work hard and so on, but they have not solved the storage issue, so that they have a lot of capacities of intermittent energy, and at the same time they need coal plants and gas plants and so on. So if they had solved the storage, they would be perfect, but this doesn't work. So this is an issue and people work on it. That's okay. Second thing, indeed, and that's why you have this gray part here, we will not be able to electrify everything, and probably we will not electrify planes, or very small planes, but this is just for Mbappé to go to Stockholm.
And back.
And back, yeah. Not sure back, if you don't have the recharge. So that's why the synthetic fuels have to be considered and so on. So, and the last point about batteries. In fact, there are some scientific limitations which come from just the chemistry of the battery technology, which makes that there will be no. I mean, we can improve a little bit, but still we will need heavy batteries. It's not because you will make around some lighter stuff that you will gain a lot of weight. I mean, it's just related to the chemistry that we have in the batteries. So that's why we have this limitation in terms of comment dire.
Mobility.
Non, mais qu'on peut faire 300 km. La question de l'autonomie. Autonomie. These limitations are not just because we have not succeeded to do better. It's because it is related to the fact that you have only one electron exchange between lithium and lithium plus, and so on. I mean, there are many things like that. So I don't think that the problem of the weight will drastically change in the future.
Just one comment on the case of airplanes. You can think of electrifying the airplanes for very short distances. That's one thing. And then there is this myth of the hydrogen airplane. I just want to come back to that because that's a very nice example of a decision which is completely misled. I mean, if you take the hydrogen airplane, if you want to make a long-range hydrogen airplane, you need a reservoir of hydrogen which is about the size of the airplane. which basically means that you are transporting the reservoir, which is not the first function of the airplane. But the example is really nice because it comes from an idea, which is we have rockets with hydrogen. But when you look at a rocket, the function of a rocket is to transport weight. It's not to transport volume. So you can have a huge rocket with a very small satellite. And that's why you can use hydrogen for moving a rocket. And that's why it's not reasonable to do it with airplanes. So you are going to tell me why on earth the people in Airbus or whatever big industry are saying they are going to make airplanes with hydrogen. They're not going to make airplanes with hydrogen. They're just pretending to, because that's a way of greening the activity and being able to ask something else. So I think that's the kind of thing that engineers should never allow themselves to do. I was told when I was a little boy that you never lie without any consequence. I think that's something which we have to keep in mind. There is no reason to lie.
Thank you for your presentation. Very interesting.
All right, thank you. Then maybe to wrap up very quickly, there is still a glimpse of hope. I think that's one thing that we wanted to convey in this conference, and even for business students, because most of us are business students, there is something to do if you get interested into the science and then you go into the industry. I think there are two things that we can remember. The first one is research is not a line of cost, but a line of investment. And then, on the other hand, it would be interesting to develop links between marketing and R&D for the industry sector to benefit from it. 3 quick things about the next conferences and projects that we will have for everyone here. This was the second conference of the cycle on major challenges for the future between ESCP and the Académie des Sciences. We will have the third one, I believe, on the 6th of December, which I think is on AI, topic related to that. And then we will also have another conference on the 4th of November, which will be with Ariane Espace CEO, and it will be on geopolitics and markets of space. So here you can find a slide where you can register. And the last thing is we are currently organizing a big public speaking competition across all 5 campuses at ESCP. It's in English. So if you are into that and you're interested, you can find the different posts on our LinkedIn, and tomorrow it will be on Instagram, and you can register, and we will have semifinals on each campus and then a final here in Paris. All right, so that was the quick promotion moment. So thank you everyone for attending, and thank you to our guests, Professor Fontecave and Professor Bréchet, and see you for the next conference. Thank you.